Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to clean your airbrush gun, some troubleshooting tips, and how to take it apart and put it back together again. The Cookie Countess airbrush gun is a single action gun, meaning that air is always flowing through the gun, but color only comes out when you pull back on the trigger. Now to clean your gun, a lot of you have heard you have to take apart your entire gun. What I'm going to show you how to do is just take apart the stuff that really gets dirty, which is the front part of the gun where the color flows. It's a lot easier than taking apart the entire gun and usually gets the job done. First, you're going to remove the needle cap from the forward part of the gun. Here you can see the needle. As you pull back on the trigger, the needle disappears. This is when color is allowed to flow through from the color well. Be careful not to poke yourself with the needle, it is sharp. The next thing we're going to do is unscrew the handle here in the back. Now here again, you can see when you pull back on the trigger, the needle and everything else is attached and it will all pull back with you. So if we want to remove the needle for cleaning, we're going to unscrew this piece here. This is actually called the needle chucking net. There'll be a quiz later, so be sure to remember it. Now we can see we can loosen up that needle and pull it back to ensure that we don't poke ourselves or bend our needle. Now we can remove the nozzle cap. And the next piece in here is the nozzle, which is a very small piece. You can see it there. And this also has to get unscrewed from your gun. Now remember when you got your gun, that tiny little wrench that came with it, that's what you're going to need here. So you want to loosen up that piece with the wrench. And once you have it loose, you want to go ahead and grab it with your fingers to unscrew it. You don't really want to unscrew it all the way with the wrench for fear that it might fall on the floor and you're going to drop it. So hold it in your fingers and turn your gun, that way you don't drop it. Set that piece aside. Now our needle is completely exposed, and now we can push it through from the back to the front and take it completely out of the gun. Now at this point, we have removed all the pieces that the color touches and the parts that get dirty when we're using our airbrush gun. Now you can see my trigger is still in place even though the needle has been removed because of this piece here that has a spring inside that is pressing up against the trigger, and also there is a small piece in there called the lever guide. So these will stay in place as long as you don't remove this back part. Now that we've gotten to this part, let's talk about cleaning it. You have out all the pieces from the front of the gun and the needle, and you're going to soak these either in some distilled water or some vodka, maybe for 15-20 minutes. Wipe them down, make sure there's no residue left on them. You can also then now run some water through the color well. It will flow freely out the front of your gun because the needle has been removed. You can take a paper towel, you can wipe down the inside of the well, the front of the nozzle, anything you need to do to get it clean. Now to put it back on, we're going to just work in reverse order. We're going to put the nozzle back on. Again, you want to get that little wrench. Once you have it attached, give it a twist with the wrench, not too tight so you can't get it off next time, but tight enough. And now go from the back end through again with the needle. There you can see it come out. Pull it back a little bit though so it's not sticking all the way out so you don't, again, chance bending it or poking yourself with it. Now we're going to go back and add the nozzle cap and then the needle cap. Once that's done, push your needle all the way through until you can't push it anymore. And now go back and again attach the needle chucking net. Make sure it's tight and check the resistance on your trigger. Make sure when you pull back, the needle and everything else comes back with it. Now you can screw the handle back on and you're good to go. That's it. Now let's talk about some troubleshooting tips. When your gun is working as it should, When you pull back on the trigger, you'll feel resistance. If at any point your trigger is flopping around and doesn't seem to be doing anything, the cause is that this piece right here is not screwed in properly and putting the right amount of pressure against your trigger. This could have happened if you took it apart, put it back together, and didn't screw it tight enough. It could have worked its way loose. But see, as we pull back, or rather unscrew this part, see how the trigger starts to lose that resistance and it flops around. So if that's your problem, all you need to really do, assuming that the trigger is in where it should be and that needle guide is still in there, you want to unscrew the handle and just screw this piece back in until you feel the resistance fully against it with the trigger. Continue threading this piece until you feel all the resistance that was there when you first got the gun against that trigger. If you want to double check that your needle's in the right spot, unscrew the needle chucking net, make sure the needle's pushed all the way forward, and then reattach it. Now you can put your handle back on and you're all done. Your trigger is tight again with the correct resistance. Everything should work as it should. The second most common question I get about these types of guns is, I'm not pulling back on the trigger, but color is still coming out of the front of my gun. So let's troubleshoot this. First, you want to remove the needle cap. Now let's take a look at that needle. When the needle is in place as it should, it's actually blocking the color from flowing. As you pull back, the needle gets out of the way for the color to come forward. But that needle needs to be pushed all the way forward in your gun, and that's held in place by the needle chucking net. So if we unscrew this, see how it's not moving the needle at all? What may have happened is if you took this part apart and back together again, perhaps the needle chucking net was screwed in without the needle being all the way forward. So everything appears to be working properly and with the right tension, but it's allowing the color to flow through when really it shouldn't be. So again, unscrew this part, push the needle all the way forward until you feel it stop, and now re-screw the chucking net to ensure that the needle stays where it should. Now you can screw back on the needle cap. Again, check and make sure everything's moving right, and then screw back on the handle. And that's it, you're done, problem solved. Now at the beginning of this video, I showed you how to clean your gun without taking the gun fully apart. If you do have to take your gun apart completely, let's show you how to do it and put it back together again. First, you're going to remove the handle in the back and you're going to release the needle chucking net. Now, you can pull back on the needle a little bit and get it out of the way here so you don't poke yourself as you remove the front pieces. You're going to remove the needle cap, the nozzle cap. Now, you're going to remove the nozzle. Remember in the beginning we did this with that little wrench that comes with your airbrush gun. So loosen it up with the wrench, but don't necessarily remove it all the way with the wrench. Grab it with your fingers so you don't drop it, and then twist your gun until it becomes loose. Now you can push your needle all the way through to take your needle out of the gun. Remember, it is sharp, so be careful. Now that this is done, we can remove these back pieces here. You're going to unscrew from here, and the whole thing will come out in one piece. Now be careful, because as you unscrew this, the tension is becoming loose on your trigger and on your lever guide, and you don't want to lose these, especially the lever guide. It is pretty small. Take this part out. Now be careful to remove the lever guide, there it is, and the trigger. So put those aside. Now we have everything free of our gun. Now you can also take apart this housing piece back here that has the spring in it. Just unscrew, and you're going to have 3 separate pieces once you're done. Once this is done, we're going to put everything in a bowl with distilled water or vodka or airbrush cleaner. If you're using airbrush cleaner, you're going to want to rinse it again afterwards. Be very careful how you do this. You don't want to lose any of these small pieces. You're going to want to let it soak for maybe 15 or 20 minutes and wipe everything down dry before you put it back together again. Once all your pieces are clean and dry, let's reassemble the gun. You can basically go pretty much in reverse order from where you started. The first thing you're going to want to do is attach the trigger or the operation lever. This, for me, is probably the trickiest part. You have to thread that little post at the bottom of it into the hole. Make sure it's through. If it's not through, this will not work. You also want to make sure that the threads on the top of the trigger are facing forward. The next thing you need to do is insert the lever guide. It's kind of shaped like a shovel. You want it facing forward in your gun. I find it's easier to do this with a pair of tweezers, as it is really small and hard to hold, especially when you're holding the gun in your other hand. So with your tweezers, kind of put it in and then turn it so again it's facing towards the front of your gun. Once it's in, you can push back on this and hold it down with your finger to hold it in place while you put in the next pieces. From here, you're going to grab the needle chucking guide, which is this piece here. It does have a notch in it. You'll feel when it slides in properly, and it's going to push up against that trigger. Next, you're going to add the spring, and now you're going to add in the stopper, which screws into the main gun. If you watched the segment before in troubleshooting, you'll see how as this screws in, it puts tension onto the lever guide and the trigger, and you want to keep screwing it in until that trigger is pressed all the way towards the front of the gun. Now you can check it by pushing back, and you can feel that tension as it should be. Now we're going to go to the front of the gun again and attach the nozzle. It's a tricky little one. Hold it in your fingers and turn your gun to attach. And then you're going to want to grab that small wrench again and give it a final twist. Don't put it on so tight that you can't get it off next time, but make sure it's secure. From here, we're going to put in our needle. We're going to go in from the back and thread it forward. You'll see it come out the other end. Pull it back just a little bit so you don't poke yourself while you attach the nozzle cap and then the needle cap. Once you've done this a few times, you'll be able to do it really quickly. Now again, towards the back, we're going to make sure that needle is pushed all the way forward, and now we can attach the needle chucking net. Screw this on, make sure everything's tight, and make sure when you pull back on that trigger that the needle and everything else moves back with it. Now you can screw your handle back on, and you're done. You're ready to airbrush again.